Another big win, and the Gophers are rolling. Pharrell brought the pain, and it might be enough to keep their chances going at the NCAA tournament.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota
Whatever
Golden
turns out,
Gophers.
however it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. And you know what? We had Thursday and Friday slip-ups, but we got you covered with some weekend shows, and we're talking about the Gophers win over Rutgers that just took place moments ago. How a massive game from Pharrell Payne has sparked this team to get back on track and hopefully stay on the road to an NCAA tournament possibility. It's not even a guarantee at these points, but they are finding a way to get it done, and they have big opportunities coming up on the end of the schedule to get more quad 1 and quad 2 wins. Now, next up, they have the Ohio State Buckeyes, and that's a quad 2 opportunity, and Jamison Battle is returning, so we're going to dive into that a little bit. And then finally, we got to talk about Gophers football with their over-under estimates by FanDuel. 4.5 wins is the line. Look, if you want to win a bunch of money, I got you covered, because you should smash the over. I'll give you 3 reasons why on today's show. Now, let's kick it off first with that Rutgers win, because it was massive for the Gophers to get back on track, especially after dropping the Purdue one, which they looked like they really could have won, and then dropping an Iowa win that they should have won. Now, the Dawson Garcia injury in the Iowa game was massive, but he's been back for the last couple games now, so it's good to see him healthy and well. But the Gophers were tied with Rutgers at halftime in today's game, but then in the first 8 minutes of the second half, Gophers go on a run, 19-7, and really putting Rutgers in the rear view mirror. Now, Rutgers did come back and cut it down to a single-digit game at one point, but the Gophers had a good handle in the second half. Great generation of scoring, of defense throughout the entire second half. The Gophers have been a second half team this year, plain and simple. Now, the only times that they haven't been a second half team, the Iowa game, the Missouri game, the Purdue game. Those 3 games where they haven't been second half teams were opportunities where they could have won the game had they been their typical selves as a second half team. So hopefully the Gophers can get it together and start to put together some more holistic games. They've had some close ones. Today was a pretty good one in that factor, but overall the Gophers had some timeliness of their threes in this game. Now, typically the Gophers have been shooting a lot of 3-pointers, and I feel like in this game they weren't a huge quantity of threes that they were shooting, but it was more quality over quantity, and it was a lot more efficient. They shot 50% from the 3-point line, going 8 of 16. Now, that is fantastic. If you can shoot 50% from deep, that is a game-changing type stat, and the Gophers had that in this game. Not only that, but they had, like I said, big runs generated off of their 3-point shooting. So they had hit back-to-back threes, and then all of a sudden start getting some more paint looks and keeping that lead comfortable throughout the second half. And that was a big factor on the Gophers holding on to this one. Now, they ultimately win this game 81-70, an 11-point victory, but the biggest factor in this game was none other than Pharrell Payne. He had a career night, 21 points, which is a career high for him, on top of 11 rebounds and 2 blocks. Defensive monster, offensive monster, beast in the paint. He was getting it done from all facets. If Pharrell Payne plays like this throughout the duration of the rest of this season, the Gophers are going to be in every game, plain and simple. Because when you look at the teams that they're going to play, yes, Indiana and Ohio State have some nice, solid bigs, but Pharrell Payne is a different level, difference-making big. And Omarui and Edey are probably 2 of the best bigs in the country and in the Big Ten especially. And Pharrell Payne is hanging and banging with both of those guys. So hopefully if he continues to play like this, he could be a dominant force, not only in the Big Ten for future years to come, but also to help spur a little run that the Gophers are going to need if they want these tournament hopes to keep on going. Now, the Gophers had 4 players in double figures in this game. They had Pharrell Payne with 21, Elijah Hawkins with a big 16 points for the team, and then actually 5 Gophers in double figures. Slipped up on that one. Mike Mitchell Jr. cracked into the double digits with 12 points, Cam Christie with 10 points, and Dawson Garcia with 14 points. Now, 5 of Dawson Garcia's points came from the charity line. He shot a 5 of 7 from the free throw line. Pharrell Payne 5 of 11 from the free throw line. So both of them hopefully can knock down a few more free throws, especially because free throws have been a bad habit for the Gophers in these past 2 seasons. If they can continue to improve on those numbers and keep getting the charity stripe, it could be a difference-making thing for the Gophers. But overall, I think, I'm not going to lie to you, I still somewhat worry about the Gophers' depth usage. They have the depth. You have Parker Fox on the bench, Josh Joseph coming off the bench, Braden Carrington, a high-level defender off the bench, and then Isaiah Enan has shown flashes throughout the season as well. You have a 9-deep bench, but Coach Ben Johnson does not utilize that bench as much as I would like. He puts his starters 30 to 40 minutes a game consistently over these last few games. And I feel like that could play a factor in hurting the Gophers in the long run, because yes, the Gophers have the depth, but they run their starters too long, in my opinion. And they play a rotation of about 3 to 4 players, but those 3 to 4 players only get about 5 to 12 minutes in the rotation. Now, I think Parker Fox and Josh Joseph especially need more time. I've been saying it all season. And in the moments where they get more time, they have flashed, they have sparked, they have energized this team into moments that help them win games. So hopefully they can start to get those guys some more quality minutes, because it's going to be needed, plain and simple. And if the Gophers want to continue to win, they're going to need more minutes from their bench guys. Part of teams climbing back from the Gophers having leads in these games could absolutely be due to the fatigue and simple errors that come along with fatigue. So you can cancel that. You can rid of that fatigue if you get your starters some more quality breathers and allow those guys like Parker Fox, Josh Joseph, Braden Carrington to rotate in, maybe get about 12 to 15 minutes a game. Bring your starters minutes to around 32 minutes a game instead of 40 minutes a game, and all of a sudden you're seeing more efficiency from those starters because they're well rested. So yes, you have the bodies and athleticism, so use them. Minnesota is going to need to stay fresh if they want to have any shot at playing in the tournament. Now, they're currently 6-8 in quad 1 and quad 2 games. Those are huge when it comes to resume building for the NCAA tournament. If they can keep this going and they beat Ohio State would be a quad 2 win. That would make you 7-8 in those type of games. Then you got Illinois, Nebraska, and Northwestern on the road this season. If you win those games, those are all quad 1 level games. You win all 3 of those, all of a sudden you're 10-8 in the quad 1 and 2 department, and plus a ranked win in Illinois. That would be massive for the Gophers and their chances at the NCAA tournament prior to anything happening in the Big Ten tournament. So if the Gophers want to get there, those games are important. They'll have the opportunities, but they have to capitalize on them. Now, their next opponent, as it currently stands, like I said, would be a quad 2 game at home here in Dinkytown. The opponent is Ohio State, who is one of the lowest teams in the Big Ten standings, but they are a quality team and still pulling together through drastic change. Their coach just got fired, but they're still pulling off some major upsets. We're going to talk about a bit more about them coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find the quality professionals that are the right fit for your role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Now, LinkedIn is the go-to spot for me. Anytime I need to look for a new job, anytime I'm curious about what jobs are out there, anytime I recommend my parents, my colleagues, my friends, they're like, man, I need a change of scenery. I need something different. This doesn't feel like the right fit. I tell them, build up your LinkedIn profile and hit that job board on there, because they have constantly updated opportunities and the right small businesses are out there. You can find the right fit for you. And that's why small businesses need to be on LinkedIn, and you can go over and post about your job for free. Now, LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. And hiring is easy when you have many candidates that are quality to choose from. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Now, LinkedIn Jobs knows small businesses are wearing tons of different hats and they don't have the times or the resources to hire. So LinkedIn is making it constantly easier in their process. And they even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker for you. Now, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and it's your time to join that crew. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post about your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about this next matchup for the Golden Gophers men's basketball team, because Ohio State is next on the docket. Now, you're talking about an Ohio State team that just had their coach fired. They're up in everything is chaos when it comes to coaching changes in the middle of the season. They have a mixture of vets and young talent on their team, and it seems like things could go astray, could go awry. They were 4-10 in the Big Ten prior to a recent upset, but now all of a sudden they get this big upset, and that might be what was needed to get the ship right to finish off this season. Now, typically you don't see a lot of firings in the middle of the season when it comes to basketball coaching, especially at the collegiate level, but it happened here in Ohio State, and they rallied around it. Rallied so much so that they took down the number 2 team in the country in Purdue. Now, Minnesota gave Purdue a scare at Mackey Arena just earlier this week. All of a sudden, Purdue takes on Ohio State and drops a game. So Ohio State is one of those scrappy teams that you cannot overlook. You cannot look past. You have to look at it in a bigger perspective. Now, yes, they might not have the most pretty record when it comes to the Big Ten schedule, but what they do have is a respectable net ranking. They're sitting in the 70s currently, and that should be enough for a quad 2 game for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and that is a game that can help you build your resume. So the Gophers need to keep this streak going. Now, we had mentioned on a previous show last week, 5 of your next 7 games you probably need to win, and this is one of those 5 that you really need to capitalize on, because it brings you a quad 2 win and a little bit of revenge, because a familiar face is coming back to Dinkytown, and that is Jamison Battle. Now, he has been a key player for the Ohio State Buckeyes. On top of being a scorer for them, he has been a lights out 3-point shooter for them all season. I believe he's shooting his best numbers from 3. And the last time the Gophers played Ohio State earlier in the season at Ohio State, Jamison Battle put his stamp on the game early. Now, the Gophers lost that game big, but if you just look at the box score, it looks like they got blown out. If you watch the actual game, you'll see that they did not play well in the first half. They clawed back a good majority of that second half, and then finally they kind of got worn down at the very end of it, and it looked a lot bigger than it actually was. If the Gophers can put their foot on the gas from the jump and be able to not only slow this team down, but be able to control the tempo, play their style of game, and not get sped up, turn the ball over, and what have you, which has always been kind of the downfall of this Gophers team. If they can get away from that, that is how they can get themselves back on track and back into the win column against Ohio State at home. And you know how this Gophers team plays at home. When the crowd is on their side, when the energy is there to fuel them, this Gophers team can get as hot as any in the country. So hopefully the crowd will be there and on their side. They'll have a little bit of extra motivation and wanting to get a win against their former teammate in Jamison Battle. And this Gophers team is much different than the Gophers team that Ohio State played back in December. Now, the Gophers' last game, like I said, Garcia was huge in that game. He put on a clinic in the second half. He scored over 30 points against the Ohio State Buckeyes, and you better believe that Ohio State is going to try to take away and slow down Dawson Garcia in this upcoming game. Now, that's easier said than done, but Dawson Garcia will probably be a focal point of Ohio State's defensive plan. So that means you need other players to step up in that facet, in that capacity. Now, we could see Elijah Hawkins, Mike Mitchell Jr., Pharrell Payne, who's just coming off a career night, try to step up as scorers in in that front. But I think the biggest player in this Ohio State game is going to be Cam Christie, because Cam Christie is playing at a whole nother level compared to how he was playing back in December. He's more comfortable. He's more confident. He is more dangerous with his mid-range game and what he can get away with and how he can create separation. We've seen him score in double figures in his past 6 games. In fact, prior to the Rutgers game, Cam Christie was scoring about almost 16 points a game in his last 5 games, and he was shooting almost 50% from 3-point. Cam Christie is playing on a whole nother level, and I think he could be the X factor in this Ohio State game, especially if they try to take away Dawson Garcia. So expect a lot of Christie, a lot of pain probably on that interior post, but I think Cam Christie is going to be the X factor. Now, Minnesota's second repeat opponent of the season. The first one was Michigan State. And in that Michigan State 2-game series, Minnesota should have won that first game, but they dropped it. Didn't have Elijah Hawkins in it, but they responded in the second game, played stronger, played tougher, played cleaner basketball, and found a way to get the win at home. So hopefully this can echo that. We lost on the road to Ohio State. They're coming to Dinkytown. Hopefully we have players that are playing a little bit cleaner, a little bit faster, a little bit better than what we were playing in December of 2023. And that will hopefully help the Gophers follow the path of righting their wrongs and getting a win in their second time playing this opponent. We'll see if that will happen, but Minnesota has been hot shooting as of late, especially over these last 2 games. So with that new confidence that they're playing with, if they can continue to play with that confidence that we've seen over the last 5 games and hold and maintain the leads, not let it slip away like Purdue, not let it slip away like Iowa, if you can do that, I have full confidence that the Gophers can rally off a second win in a row and keep this thing going before they move it on the road, playing Nebraska and then Illinois. If you can rattle off these 4 wins in a row, that would be massive for the Gophers' chances moving forward. Now, every time I talk about the Gophers' chances, that's just what it is. It's a chance. It is not a guarantee. It is not a certainty, but the Gophers are still in the running, and that's what matters. And as long as they keep rattling off these wins, especially in the quad 2 and quad 1 games, they're going to have a shot to put their names in the conversation, regardless of what any bracketology or any of these folks say. If they can pull off the next game, Ohio State, if they can pull off a Nebraska, if they can pull off an Illinois, those next 3 games, that could drastically shift the landscape for the Gophers and have a lot more bracketology sites and experts talking about keeping an eye on this Gophers basketball team. Now, to close today's show, I want to talk about football, and we're going to talk about the Gophers over-under when it comes to win totals, because right now it is absolutely ridiculous. You have to smash the over. 4.5 is the line, and there's some Gopher fans worried. Well, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be coming up next. First, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel, because you can get buckets with your first bet at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. That's $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. So definitely go on over, bet on all your favorite NBA lines, because the NBA is getting in full swing here after the All-Star break. And if you need to pick an East Conference winner, I'm telling you right now, it would be smart to lay some money down on the Boston Celtics. But if you're a big-time homer, you're big-time on the Wolves, and you think they can pull off that Western Conference, then maybe go take a shot at it. But you can check out all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more over at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA and of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, we're moving this thing over to football, and can you believe, I think it's absolutely blasphemous that the Gophers over-under line when it comes to FanDuel Sportsbook and their over-unders for total wins on the season, the Gophers are listed at 4.5. 4.5. That means if you take the over, all the Gophers have to do is win 5 games. That's exactly what they did last year. And I think they're basing it a little bit too much on last year and what went wrong, as opposed to looking at the whole picture. And that's where you can capitalize on these opportunities. That's where you can find an easy win like this one looks to be. So if you look at it, I am more than sure that this line will increase prior to August. Once we get into August, I'm betting that these sports books are going to be like, whoa, hold on. Put it to like 5.5, 6.5. That makes more sense. Maybe put it right at 6. Maybe put it at, I don't know, somewhere higher than 4.5. So if you want to take advantage, now is the time. Now there's 3 reasons why I think this line is an easy over when it comes to the Gophers being at 4.5. All you need is 5 wins if you take that over. Now, those 3 reasons, the first one is the schedule. The schedule is going to be what a lot of fans, a lot of media, a lot of folks bring up as a reason of concern. But honestly, if you take a deeper look at what the schedule looks like and all the shifting pieces and all the shifting landscapes and everything behind it all, and you don't just look at what teams did last year, because so much changes year to year, especially with draft personnel leaving, with recruiting, with transfer portal departures, all of that stuff. If you add it in, you look at the coaching changes and things like that, it could have drastic shifts. You look at Northwestern a year ago, and people were thinking they're going to win 2 to 3 games. They come out with 8 wins. That is why you can't necessarily just look at one year. You have to look at the larger picture, the changes, and all of that stuff. So if you look at all of that, and you look at the schedule, it's pretty comparable to last year's schedule. Now, when I say comparable, I'm not saying it's one for one, it's the same thing. But what I'm saying is if you look at the highs and the lows and the tiers of teams within it, it's pretty equal. In fact, last year's schedule might even be a little bit harder. Last year's Michigan team was the national champions. They did not lose a game. They dominated almost every single team they played, and they were by far the hardest team on the schedule for the Gophers last year. There is no one on the Gophers 2024 schedule that will be as difficult as the Michigan Wolverines were last season. Now, the closest thing on the Gophers 24 schedule is probably Penn State. But again, Michigan is far better. So that's already a 1-to-1. The hardest game is not going to be as hard as it was last year. Then you go to your next one in that tier, and you're talking about an Ohio State team last year that is likely better than any team on Michigan or Minnesota's 2024 schedule once again. So both of their top 2 opponents last season are probably better than any opponent that they will play in this upcoming season. Now, if you want to compare the schedules year to year, Ohio State is probably like this year's Michigan game, and Ohio State's probably better than this upcoming year's Michigan team. So right now, you're already seeing how last year's schedule is a little bit more difficult than Minnesota's this upcoming year. Then you look at North Carolina last year. You play North Carolina again this year, but it's a far different team. They don't have a quarterback that's going to be probably a top 3 pick in the NFL. On top of that, they lost their number 1 passing target. They lost their number 2 passing target in their tight end, number 1 tight end on the roster, and many other players as well. And UNC takes a lot of hits. And I think that last year's UNC team is likely better or equal to what next year's USC team is, with no Caleb Williams, an unknown quarterback, whether it's Miller Moss or the transfer coming in, or the still solving of their defensive issues from last year. So you're starting to see 1 for 1. It's pretty comparable. Then you got UCLA coming into the Big Ten Conference, losing their head coach, having a head coach who has 0 head coaching experience. Not really a lot of quality players staying on or carrying over, many heading off to the draft, many maybe transferring out. So I think UCLA is more similar to Nebraska's team last year. And even then, Nebraska's team last year might be a little bit better than what we see from next year's UCLA team. Again, comparable. Then you got Iowa is the same. Wisconsin is the same. Illinois is the same. And all of those teams are still losing key players to the NFL draft. Cooper DeJean, gone. The punter, that is Iowa's bread and butter, gone. Wisconsin loses Braylon Allen, who is the player who single-handedly torched us in that game last year, gone. Illinois losing Johnny Newton, who was the game-changing difference maker of that Illinois defense in the second half, which gave Minnesota some problems. Those key players that beat Minnesota or gave them difficulties and almost beat Minnesota, they're all gone. So those games are still a lot different. Then you have other games, Maryland, North Carolina, who is again minus Drake May, minus Tez Walker, minus Bryson Nesbitt. And then you got Rutgers. And Rutgers did well last season, but Rutgers hasn't proven that they are a top quality Big Ten team. They might have had 1 good year, and that's something to still test out. We're going to see this year firsthand. Now, compared to last year's games, you had an 8-win Northwestern team. That might be like Maryland's team last year. Those two were pretty comparable. In fact, Northwestern beat Maryland last year. Then you've got Michigan State and Purdue. Both those teams had down years, but that's what I'm saying is it's all kind of pretty comparable. The lows might be a little lower for last year's schedule in 2023 for the Gophers, but the highs were also higher. So I wouldn't stress on the schedule part of it, but folks are acting like one good year from Rutgers means it's going to stay that way. UNC going through major changes and question marks. Maryland loses their Big Ten conference leading quarterback, multiple offensive linemen, their leading wide receiver, and a few defensive starters. There are so many changes going on, and the Gophers actually have a lot of starters coming back on both sides of the ball. Now, I'm not saying this schedule is easy, solely that it's very comparable and possibly slightly weaker depending on how things transition. So that's reason number one on why I'd take the over. Because the Gophers still won 5 games last year, and that's all you need for that type of bet. But on top of that, the Gophers should have won about 7 or 8 games last year because of solely looking at the Northwestern and the Illinois games in which the Gophers lost the game in the final minute or so of the game. You take those two in, you have a 7-win season, and all of a sudden you're looking at a far different record. So again, I think that's more realistic and why I would take the over. Reason number 2, the quarterback play should be improved. Now, I'm not saying I'm not saying Max Brosmer, what he did in the FCS is going to be 100% translatable and going to happen immediately with the Gophers in his 1 year here. Now, if that happens, brilliant. I love it. Let's do it. Sign me up. I'm in. But what I'm simply saying is that it will not be hard to take some steps towards progress in the passing game. Even cutting down on a couple turnovers, hitting a few more of those layup throws that were missed throughout the year last year. You do that and you're getting over 2,000 yards passing, and all of a sudden it opens up the running game a bit more for your running back, who is an all-country type player. Now that in turn should give Minnesota more opportunities to win more games next season or be in more games down to the wire next season. And then finally, reason number 3 is last year was the worst year of defense in probably the last 4 years for the Gophers due to injuries, due to maybe teams having years of film to break down, but something went wrong. And maybe that is the worst case scenario again here in 2024. Whatever happened last year, that's how the defense is this year, but that's the worst case. And if that happens, you still know this offense is very likely going to be better than last year's, which means you should have more opportunities to win games. And again, you only need 5, which is what you got last year. So even if it stays the same as last year, then that can still be better. But on top of that, it could improve. You have a new defensive coordinator who people don't have film on, who aren't going to know exactly how to respond to different things. This dude is more aggressive in his blitzing. He has new wrinkles to the defense, and just a new voice in general leading the charge could be beneficial for this Gophers defense in finding more production and positivity in a higher ranking defense throughout the year. Now, if that even improves slightly, then again, that plays in Minnesota's favor when it comes to the win total. So all 3 of those factors put together, and you are saying Minnesota has to win the same amount of games last year, take it to the bank. Run the check, sign it up, put the mortgage down on it. This is an easy one for me. And that's not even saying I definitively think that Minnesota has a good year next year. I don't know about that because I still see, I want to see some of the new pieces like Max Brosmer, like the offensive line and how they gel together, like the defense and how they come together with the new coordinator. That is the things that I still need to see in the practice field before I can say how well I think Minnesota will do. But what I can say is that getting more than 4 wins is very likely, and it feels like a steal that Minnesota fans should feel more than excited to cash in on. That's going to do it for us on today's episode of Locked On Golden Gophers. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Josh Pate of the 247 programming and what he had to say for his early rankings of the Big Ten and where Minnesota came in. We're going to talk about our thoughts on it and much more. I'll see you then. Roll the boat, Sky, you might go Gophers. And as always, don't forget to hit subscribe.